It's almost the end of 2020, and what a year it has been. People are asking us, given everything that's happened and happening, where are we in the timeline of events that are leading up to the warning or the so-called illumination of conscience? We want to talk about that and a whole lot more next on Countdown to the Kingdom. I'm Mark Mallett from thenowword.com and countdowntothekingdom.com, and I am joined finally after several weeks now by my colleague, Professor Daniel O'Connor from New York, under several feet of snow, I understand. Is that true?
We did get walloped, yes. Thank you, Mark. It is good to be back. It's been too long. I feel that way, at least. You're probably sick of me, but
yeah, I wasn't going to say that on air, but now that you bring
but now I made you, yeah.
No, it's been too long, my friend, and people have been writing us and asking us if we would come back, and it was really, truly, I'm in Canada, you're in New York. We really literally had to dig out of snow because our whole studio was covered, and it took us 3 weeks. And if you believe that, folks,
that's fairly close. I mean, I had almost 3 feet here. My relatives out west, they had almost 4 feet. So we got blasted. But yeah, I have dug out. I don't even live in an igloo like you, but yeah. I've successfully dug myself out. But wait,
yeah, I know.
Speaking of digging ourselves out, aren't we too close to each other right now? Aren't we not being morally responsible?
No, you're right. We're not really socially distanced. That's like
we're not socially distanced.
6 inches between us.
We're being reprehensible citizens right now. Let's fix that.
We should probably mask up.
Okay.
Never thought of that, you know.
Okay. That's working right.
That's good, yeah. Okay. I feel much better about that.
So let's just talk about some sides.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I can't see you.
What did you say?
What's that?
Daniel?
Are you there? Are you Mike?
I can't see you.
I can't really see too well with my glasses.
Forget it. This isn't working.
Okay, yeah, just get this. Sorry.
What the heck?
Okay. Forget about being
sorry, folks.
Responsible citizen. We gotta get. I can't do anything with those things.
We tried. Sorry about that, folks. We're just gonna have to have a fine hanging over our heads now.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Daniel,
I don't know what I'd do if I couldn't see your beautiful beard there, Mark. No.
I'm still fogged up here.
It's finally back. Didn't you not have one last time? You
right.
guys got to send Mark some encouragements to get his beard fully back there. I really miss it. But
I saw a picture of the late Sean Connery, and I said, "I'm gonna have that."
That's me.
You know, how would you say, Sean Connery? Sean, you've got to grow your beard.
You're the one who can do. You're the one who can do the impersonations, not me. Oh, good stuff. So, it wouldn't be a valid webcast if we didn't have some horribly corny, not funny joke in the beginning that Mark and I found funny. So thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah, but we know we had to do that. So we promised there'll be no more jokes for the rest of the webcast. That's right.
It was my idea, not his. But in seriousness, the last webcast we were talking about Father Michel's prophecy, and Father Michel was just one seer of many, but he did have some particularly specific prophecies, so it would make sense to bring them up again regarding what he said about the purification, the great events of purification beginning in the fall. And we want to consider whether that may have been things that we've seen the past weeks.
Right. Well, so why don't we just readdress that then, that comment, because everybody's asking, that was a big thing about what Father Michel said. And to be honest, folks, we are still, as a team at Countdown to the Kingdom, still discerning. Just because we have these seers on our website doesn't mean we've made any conclusions. I mean, first of all, that's the magisterium's role, is to draw final conclusions on various seers. And so we're still discerning Father Michel. We're still discerning his prophecies. We're not cheerleaders for these prophets, but we are cheerleaders for St. Paul, who said, test and discern prophecy, retain what is good. And so we're a cheerleader for the Lord and for Scripture. So we want to go back to this statement by Father Michel that he made back in March 26, 2020. And this is what he said. He said, "My dear people of God, we are now passing a test. The great events of purification will begin this fall. Be ready with the rosary to disarm Satan and to protect our people. Make sure that you are in the state of grace by having made your general confession to a Catholic priest. The spiritual battle will begin. Remember these words. The month of the rosary will see great things. And so, Daniel, you and I, we've already covered this in our previous webcast. We talked about the month of the Rosary and about whether there were some certain significant things during that month. And we did address that in the last webcast. One of them, of course, being the comments by the Holy Father on civil unions. And so we've talked about that. We've covered that. Since that webcast, the Vatican has really not come out with a clear statement to kind of distance themselves from that latter part where the Pope, was saying we may visit civil unions for couples who are living in these irregular or gay unions. And so, again, this has been a crisis moment for the Church, because you had immediately people in several countries, such as the Philippines and elsewhere, and even bishops in the Catholic Church cheerleading this, or priests like Father James Martin saying, "This is it. This is the Pope. This is a huge moment." Yeah,
approval. Yeah, and so basically, long story short, is what we said in our last webcast. It stands, and I was hoping that there would be a retraction.
Mm-hmm.
But in other words, a clarification, but a correction, but there wasn't one. So we're not accusing the Pope of being a formal heretic. We're not accusing him of being an anti-Pope or anything like that. We're just saying that what he stated as a personal, non-magisterial opinion, it was wrong. And just because it doesn't change doctrine doesn't mean it wasn't wrong. It was very wrong. It was gravely wrong. And yes, in that statement, we saw the beginnings of what will doubtless turn out to be a purification, because it is very soon going to be deemed hate speech to express biblical truth on human sexuality, marriage, and the family. We're going to see that. We already are seeing that in some regards, and we're going to see that explode throughout the Church and the world very soon, unfortunately.
So we have Father Michel also saying there will be the great events of purification this fall. And I think before the show, you and I undoubtedly agree that there probably was one major point of purification, and we're seeing it all over the world. There you go. Hand sanitizer.
We have been sanitized. We have been made clean. We are pure. We are.
Well, okay. Well, maybe that's not what Father Michel was referring to.
Okay, I guess not. Okay,
but we couldn't help it. By the way, speaking of
that, one was Mark's idea, not mine.
That was my cheesy joke. But while this is up on the screen, I'm just going to say this, Daniel. No one yet has talked about all this hand sanitizer going into oceans, into waterbeds, into millions of gallons of it. What are we doing to the ecosystem with this? We already know that hormones from birth control are ending up in lakes and so on, such as in Ontario, Canada, and have actually begun to change the sex of fish. This has been documented. It's been in the news. What are we doing with this hand sanitizer that is being washed? I met a woman, by the way, Daniel. We weren't really planning to go there, but I met a woman who was in the military, and this summer, and she stuck out her tongue at us and showed us the yeast infection in her body. She said, "It's from the hand sanitizer. It's killing the good bacteria in my body." Anyway, but this is not what Father Michel's talking about. Daniel, was he referring possibly to the nativity scene that appears?
There it is, the chastisement.
The chastisement that began with the nativity scene.
You are being chastised right now by seeing the Vatican nativity for Christmas of 2020.
Yes.
I'm sorry that we're giving you nightmares right now, that you will be plagued with nightmares after seeing the nativity scene in the Vatican this year. There it is.
I wasn't going to bring this up in the show because I know it's a big deal, but we couldn't help it. This is a chastisement of the faithful. There you see in the center of your screen, fish bones meeting a mummy. And
I don't even know what's supposed to be what here. Who is that cylinder? I mean, they're all cylinders. I guess Our Lady is supposed to be the biggest cylinder, but what's that other cylinder there? Who's clearly I don't know. So
I don't know.
It's hideous. Yes. I mean, and that's hideous too. But This is worse. Oh, here it is. Here's Darth Vader.
There's Darth Vader.
I don't know if this is a shepherd or a wise man, but it's terrifying. And there's either an alien or an astronaut. You know, everyone in his right mind agrees,
even
in the church and even in the secular world, that this is disgusting.
Yeah.
And even Pope Francis seems to agree that this is not worth looking at. But
it's painful, Daniel, because at a time right now when the faithful we're hurting, we're down and out, we're feeling the pain of those comments and of the civil unions. And not only that, we've been joking about the masks and everything, but we're seeing our freedoms disappear. And you talk about the great events of the fall. I don't know how anyone cannot look at the churches being locked down again in Canada, in the UK, in other states and other places all over the world. Severe lockdowns right now, bigger restrictions than they were in the spring. And we're seeing our freedoms disappearing. And it was, again, another painful statement. And Daniel and I we're not anti-pope. We are sons of the church. We are in communion with the Holy Father. But we also recognize when there's an elephant in the living room. And I mentioned this in my blog, how painful it was when the Holy Father chastised in his new book, Let Us Dream, I think it's called, with Austin Ivervey. He co-authored it with him. And the Pope chastised those of us who are denouncing these restrictions which are having catastrophic effects on the poor in the world. And he denounced those of us who are calling out the governments in these unjust restrictions, not only against the church, but against people who are losing their businesses and jobs and so on from lockdowns. He suggested that these people are narcissistic, that they are closed in on their own self-interested little world. It was painful to read those words this month, Daniel, from our Holy Father.
Yeah. And look, this is a distinction we're making, the magisterium versus the personal opinions. We are not rebelling against Pope Francis's magisterium. That's him acting in his office as Pope. But when he gives personal opinions, he's just as prone as any human being to the fallibility and the errors that any of us could succumb to. And that's precisely what he did in the civil unions remark we talked about earlier, and now in his lambasting of people, saying that they're selfish for protesting against these dictatorial measures that we're suffering under right now, particularly with respect to the sacraments and the Mass. I mean, never in the history of the Church has there been a restriction of the sacraments on such a wide scale as we have seen in this coronavirus epidemic. And to fail to protest against that would itself be lamentable. And I mean, this is not just Mark and I saying this. We have so many churchmen. Look at Cardinal Sarah, Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Mueller, Bishop Strickland, Bishop Schneider. There are so many cardinals and bishops begging us to oppose these lockdowns that are restricting our freedoms and our rights as Christians, as Catholics. It would be insane to not express our opposition in the strongest terms possible. And yet here we have the Pope calling us selfish, self-interested, selfish people for doing that. So it's really sad. It is painful.
You've got, once again, you've got the head of the, there's our timeline in the background, but I wanted to bring up this quote from the head of the United Nations. Sorry, not the United Nations, but I'm trying to bring this up on my screen so I can see it. You've got... sorry, it's hard for me. Oh, there we are. Dr. David Nabarro, the World Health Organization, rather. And he, here he comes out and says that these lockdowns that now we are entering into this fall, you talk about the great events of the purification, these lockdowns have come again. And he said, this is a terrible, ghastly global catastrophe, these lockdowns. He said we may well have a doubling of world poverty by early next year. That's 2021 because of these lockdowns. He said, stop it. Stop using lockdowns as a primary means of controlling this virus. And so we wanted to bring that up because, Canon 212 says that the faithful can address their shepherds. The faithful can speak up when it involves speaking for the common good. And we feel we have a moral duty to continue to raise this point. We're not judging the motives or the information. We don't know what the Holy Father, what he's being told and so on, but he mustn't realize, because he's an advocate for the poor. You know, he speaks about the preferential option for the poor, and there's no one being hurt more by these lockdowns than the poor. You have also the World Food Program of the United Nations saying that, and this is startling, Daniel, this is absolutely heartbreaking, 130 million more people will face starvation by the end of this year because of the lockdowns. This is extraordinary. So far, we've got 1.6 million who have died, according to statistics from COVID-19, but we're talking about another 128 million dying just from the lockdowns alone. This is insanity. This is insane.
It's insane. I mean, so can you cue up Father Michel's prophecy real quick again? I just want to emphasize something that I've mentioned in a webcast before, but the distinction between what happened in the spring and what's happening now. And I just, whether or not you want to regard Father Michel's prophecies as authentic, I think this is a poignant thing to consider. He said, we are now passing a test. So when did he say that? He said that in March 26, 2020. That was right after the spring lockdowns had basically fully initiated. I think it was just several days before that here in America, most of the lockdowns came into full force. I can't remember the exact details, but the point is, back then it was a test. And I've said in previous webcasts since then, we flunked that test. As a church, we flunked it. So what is different? The question now is, what is different about what we have seen this fall? People, since the beginning of this epidemic, people were saying, yes, there's going to be a second wave in the fall. So I'm not, that's not prophetic in and of itself. The point is, what's happening now is no longer a test. We already flunked that by rolling over to these godless mandates that we suspend all the sacraments. And some bishops even went further than the mandates and told all of the priests in their diocese, no, you cannot baptize, you cannot offer reconciliation. But even aside from that, we rolled over. Most bishops and priests rolled over to these mandates. So that was the flunk. Now the purification has begun. Yeah. We're seeing the fruits of our failure basically beginning to unfold on a world scale. So although superficially what's happening now might seem similar to what happened in the fall, sadly, I think it's much worse what's happening now. Even if the lockdowns themselves aren't worse, I think that what they forebode, what they foretell regarding what's coming is worse. Right.
Yeah. I mean, when we are locking down the sacraments, I mean, this coming Christmas in Canada, I'll tell you, this is what's so extraordinary, is you've got airlines flying overhead right now, Daniel, packed airlines, 120 people on those planes sitting 2 feet apart. They're all taking off their masks during their meals, and this is fine. But in Canada, in Saskatchewan, my province, you can only have 30 people in the cathedral in Saskatoon that seats 1,000 people. You see, you can go into a restaurant and you can sit down and have plexiglass hanging between you and the booth, and you can sit there for an hour and a half. Nobody's wearing masks. You can sit and do that with that meal.
I do that. I mean, I go to get coffee and no masks. Yeah.
But you can't sit at the sacred meal in the same way. So this purification, the test right now, is a test for us as a church to say, wait a minute, the state is discriminating against us and we will not abide by this. But you know why this is such a severe test, Daniel, is because if bishops start to stand up to the state, they are going to face prosecution. If the priests stand up, they're going to face. This is now the rubber meets the road. Now we're realizing this is going to cost us for standing up for Jesus Christ and saying Jesus Christ is essential. The Eucharist is essential.
The most essential thing in the face of the planet. And I said in the previous webcast, and I'll say it again, dear priests, you are the most essential workers on the face of the planet. Don't doubt that for a second. You're far more essential than anyone else, and your ministry is the most essential ministry in history anywhere on earth. So, we need to recognize that truth in our words and in our deeds. So I think it's fairly safe to say that we failed the test and that we're seeing the beginning of the purification unfolding right now in the same regard.
Daniel, I don't think we can underestimate also what has begun this fall, just late in the fall, and that is the rollout of a vaccine far ahead of schedule. And these vaccines are a new technology, the RNA vaccines. I mean, there's several vaccines, I think over 200, in fact, that have been in development. But the ones that we're rolling out right now are an experimental vaccine. They bypass the animal tests and are now using them on humans. And as of December 18th, there was a report put on the CDC's website that 3,150 people had adverse reactions, so much so that they could not go to work or needed to see a doctor or a nurse. This is extraordinary. And you've got scientists all around the world warning, top-level scientists warning that this is dangerous. These are untried experiments. During the trials on animals in previous years, it has killed them. They've been a disaster, these experimental vaccines, and yet we have rushed them out on the people. Now, we're not going to get into all the technical stuff. My readers on thenowword.com know that I put on my journalist hat. I'm a former news reporter. I've gone into the science and quoted the scientists. I'm not a scientist, but I've quoted the scientists. I've gone in with dozens of hours of extensive research to highlight for you the warnings, the dangers that we face. Catastrophic, according to some scientists, and we can't ignore. But I don't know, Daniel. That is one aspect of the great purification we face, because the guys behind these vaccines, the Rockefeller Institutes, Bill Gates Foundation, they are on record as saying that vaccines are a means to reduce population growth. And we're entrusting these guys with an experimental vaccine? That's not conspiracy theory. That's out of their own mouths. We've seen them. We've got videotapes of them saying this. How can we not see that this is dangerous, what humanity is facing right now? Yeah.
And, and I haven't had the chance to look into this as deeply as Mark has. So, and if we even tried to say things, because this is going to go up on YouTube, if we even tried to say things, they delete the video. So we can't go into detail right now.
That's right.
You'll have to go to our personal blogs to see that. They'll censor those eventually too, but they're censoring the social media more quickly. But yeah, so, and these concerns are valid. And, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. And yet I still personally have great reservations and concerns, even about the science. But leaving aside the science, we also have the moral question, which is being hotly debated in the church right now, regarding the fact that, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I remember, I think every vaccine for COVID has in some degree been tainted, basically, by abortion. Some are developed from aborted fetal cells. Some are only tested in aborted fetal cells. But either way, there is a remote material cooperation with abortion.
Right. Even the synthetic vaccines have been tested apparently on the fetal cells. Right. So we're using
even the Pfizer vaccine has been tested.
Yeah.
So it's not there's different vaccines here have different degrees of cooperation with the grave evil of abortion, but all of them seem to be tainted in some regard. And yes, the church has said it can be permissible in grave situations. This is from the Vatican back in 2005. This is not new. That it can be permissible in grave situations to use such a vaccine. But the church has made it equally clear that this cannot be mandatory. This must be left up to the conscience of the individual. And yet we have even bishops, certainly the secular world, but even bishops saying, no, it's morally obligatory. That's in stark contrast to what the Vatican has said, that it's up to the individual to decide and that this cannot be made mandatory. So if this is made mandatory, and I think we all see that that's coming, then it would be hard to see this as anything but a beginning of the great events of purification, where very soon we will be required, it will be mandatory to accept something even more evil for the common good.
Right. And you've got health ministers in Canada, Israel, the UK, and other places saying that it will be the private sector. And so we've had governments saying, oh, yeah, the vaccine won't be mandatory. But, the private sector, they may not let you in shopping malls, restaurants, and so on. So, in other words, the government's not going to have to mandate it. Look, if you can't go into a shopping mall, if you can't go to the grocery store and get your food,
it's de facto.
It's de facto mandatory. But let's just bring up for just a brief moment that statement from the Vatican so that you can see it. And we, thank God the Vatican is saying this. It's number 5 from this recent document that they put out, a statement saying that in any case, from the ethical point of view, the morality of vaccination depends not only on the duty to protect one's own health, but also on the duty to pursue the common good. We understand that. But it also says a moral obligation in the sentence before. Sorry, I'm lost now, Daniel, on this.
No, that's all right. You said that was good that you said that because that is another important point. But in the sentence before that, it says, yes, as a rule, meaning this always applies. Right. Vaccines must be voluntary.
Oh, yes, must be voluntary. Yes.
Yeah, and that's right in the very first sentence of Section 5 there. And this is the specific Vatican document that just came out in response to the COVID vaccines in particular. Even then, the Vatican is making clear it must be voluntary. Now, the point is these vaccines, they would indeed amount to remote material cooperation with the grave evil of abortion. Depending upon the vaccine, it will determine just how remote. But in all of them, there's something. And yet the Vatican here in point 5 is saying that this cooperation itself is only illicit in the absence of other methods to combat the virus, such as preventative measures. And there are many preventative measures. We want to get to more important things. We don't have time to go into detail on them. But if you do even a little bit of research, you'll realize, first of all, that if you don't have a comorbidity and if you're not extremely old, you have an incredibly tiny chance of dying from coronavirus.
It's so for over 99.5%, right?
Yeah. For someone in my situation, and we're practically the same age, right, Mark? that I have.
I'm a little younger.
I have
please.
Okay, of course. I have I don't know. I should have looked up the number. I have a 0.001% chance of dying from coronavirus. So it's hard for me to see that as a grave situation for my own sake. Now, of course, I have a duty to try and protect others from the virus, but I can do that by, if I get a virus or something, the virus or something that looks like it might be, by making sure that I'm taking the common sense measures to not infect other people. So we can't pretend that this vaccine is absolutely essentially necessary in categorical terms.
Right, and I think it's worth it just pointing out there are other things. It can't be mandatory. You've got the wonder drug hydroxychloroquine, which 84%. One study came out just recently, 84% reduction in hospitalizations. Vitamin D, a study just came out showing 54% effectiveness against the coronavirus. And then you had that one doctor pleading before the health services in the United States saying there's over 30 studies showing that ivermectin is almost 100% cure rate of the coronavirus vaccine. We don't even need a vaccine really at this point. And I just want to say too, I'm not anti-vaccine. For instance, the tetanus vaccine has been shown to really help people. But when and I've studied this very broadly now as a journalist, the amount of vaccine injury and so on, and of course now the risks with this experimental vaccine, you really have to wonder what the heck is going on that we are forging ahead, rushing ahead with this right now. And so I was just going to bring up to you this little graphic here, is that we're not anti-vaccine, but we're also not conspiracy theorists. And, I wrote this little thing here that says conspiracy theory, 2 simple words used more and more to avoid discussing the facts, to deny the obvious, and maintain an air of intellectual superiority to the applause of the politically correct. So today what we're hearing now is anybody, especially in the mainstream media, to dismiss anybody, including Nobel Prize winners, speaking about some of the dangers we're facing right now. They're automatically dismissed as conspiracy theorists, and that's just a really unintellectual way to avoid having to discuss the facts that, sometimes are contrary to what the status quo is. So,
if you need an epithet to refute a particular
Right.
proposition, then that in and of itself should tell you that you might need to do a little more research. So, we shouldn't have a prejudice one way or the other in these questions. We should be willing to research them with intellectual honesty on their own grounds. And if you do
Right.
so with the grace of the Holy Spirit and also consulting what heaven's messages have had to say, don't stress. You will be able to stay in that straight and narrow path of our Lord that he wills of the remnant today. We know we're going to talk more about that in the ending minutes of this webcast, hopefully, that you have nothing to fear. But yeah, we
Daniel,
do need to take this all very seriously.
before we move on, then I just want to say, if a lot of people have been looking for the major event, right, from because of Father Michel's words. And it's not just Father Michel, by the way. Other seers on our website have all been speaking. Jennifer, that this is now the great unraveling. Gisela Cardia, that the time is over and that new diseases are coming. Luz de Marie, the same thing. Now we're seeing new viral strains. So right now we're seeing these seers that are on Countdown to the Kingdom kind of hitting full stride right now. But on this last point, if we're speaking about the beginning of the great events of purification, there is no question that with vaccines soon to become mandatory, forced, and also with technologies being tied to them, that they're, digital IDs. This is being worked on by the United Nations and Bill Gates, to have a digital ID that proves you've had a vaccine that's tied into your body. This is not conspiracy theory. This is stuff that's right out there on the United Nations website. Obviously, we can see where this is all going, that there are going to be two tiers of society. This is the beginning of a great sifting, because I think people are going to be facing hunger, because not only are we destroying through these lockdowns the supply chain, we're already seeing that famine is going to be rolling in. Gisela Cardia, one of the seers in Countdown to the Kingdom, said this recently. You are going to be facing famine. And so with this hunger tied to a vaccine, you can already see this is certainly the beginning of some kind of new system that's going to put a lot of pressure on people who are going to make choices based on their belly and maybe not necessarily the best moral choices, Daniel.
Yes, the infrastructure of the Antichrist is almost completely in place. And you got to wonder, if the infrastructure is in place, what do you think is coming next? The real thing.
Right.
And that's very soon. So, but as you were saying, these great events, people are looking for something extraordinary. And you might think, wow, there wasn't a major city didn't get nuked this fall, so I guess I can just dismiss all these prophecies. And what we're trying to say to you now is no. We are still very much in this. We are, Father Michel is one seer of many, and he's the only one I know of that gave a very clear timetable, but they're all still saying basically the same thing, namely the prophetic consensus, that these events are at the very door. And, our point here isn't Father Michel is definitely right. Again, Father Michel is one seer of many. We're not particularly attached to him, and I would advise you to not be either. The point here is the prophetic consensus is right. And the prophetic consensus says these events are at the very doorstep. We do not know the exact day. We don't need to know the exact day. All we need to know is what God expects of us in these times, so that we can fulfill the mission he has given us. And the mission is to proclaim the kingdom, because it's coming.
Yeah. If we look again at the timeline, and again, we're not going to explain it all for you tonight, but if you look at the 7 seals of Revelation that lead up to the eye of the storm, so it's all kind of on a template of a hurricane. The eye of the storm being the warning, essentially, that comes, the illumination of conscience. You see the seals that precede it. The first seal is the time of mercy that we're in. We've explained that. But the second seal is the sword that is given to the rider of the red horse, who takes away peace from the world. And again, if we're talking about this fall, something really significant happened this fall that we may not know the full effects of it until weeks, maybe months down the road, Daniel, but there was a significant event this fall.
Mm-hmm. We have seen what's been referred to as a digital espionage greater than anything else seen in history against the United States. And there's been debates as to exactly who is behind this attack, this digital cyber warfare, if you will, with many people saying it was Russia, Trump saying it was China. But the bottom line is, it happened, and it was horrendous. It was so bad, in fact, that the National Nuclear Security Administration had its database hacked. In other words, whoever did this hack knows where the United States nuclear arsenal is located. Gee, I wonder why they'd want to know that.
Right,
Can you take any guesses? I mean, this forebodes something incredibly dark.
Yeah.
This is incredibly concerning because whether it's Russia or China or Iran or North Korea, all of whom have, incredible hacking abilities and are trying to focus their efforts on that, they want to know exactly where their ultimate arch nemesis, America, they want to know where America's nuclear weapons are in hopes that if they are to strike, they can take out as many of the opponent's nuclear arsenals they can first. Right. So, that many prophecies, not just Father Michel, but many prophecies have spoken of nuclear attacks coming very soon, and this being the initiation of World War III. So we are not asking you to take this on our own word. We have many mainstream sources saying this may very well be an act of war. It hasn't been declared that yet, but it might be soon.
Right, considered an act of war, and also suggesting that the attack is not over, that it's very well possibly still continuing. So that is significant, and as you saw on the headlines that we were just putting up there, talking about how these cyber attacks are it's different. Warfare today is a little bit different, but World War III is being waged because if you consider that banking systems, economic systems, even the power grids are tied into the internet and so on, you can take down a country just digitally. Well, we don't want to hang on too long on each of these seals, but there you have an example of how the second seal might very well be, we might be seeing the first part of that happening right now that may culminate, and God forbid, in some kind of military conflict, if not a nuclear conflict. Daniel, right now, countries like the United States are printing money out of thin air. In your country, you guys just issued a stimulus. I can't remember, what was the total number of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was close to $1 trillion, and woohoo, I'm about to get $600. That's really going to change my life. Well, what it's going to do is contribute to the hyperinflation of the currency, which is going to cause it to soon collapse and make us incapable of doing anything with it. I mean, this notion, we talked about this in our previous webcast on the economic collapse, but this insanely, erroneous notion that you can just create value out of thin air. It makes no sense. Right. And yet that's how we think today, that we can just snap our fingers and create value by printing money. Well, why not just why not just give everyone $1 million then?
Right.
By that, if that's the logic you're going to take, well, because then the currency would have no meaning. But that's exactly what we're doing already.
And that's where it's going, yeah.
Yeah, the amount of money created out of thin air, it is astronomical. It's far greater than anything in history, in American history, regarding the U.S. dollar. And similar things are happening everywhere.
And this, when the American dollar and it's going to collapse, folks. This is what economists are saying all over the place. They've been warning about this for several years, since 2008, when there was the first bubble collapsed. And once again, economic collapse was staved off by what they call quantitative easing, which is printing money. It's digitally creating it out of thin air. And what this is going to do is going to put America and other parts of the world into a hyperinflation eventually. We're going to reach where the dollar is going to collapse, and suddenly a loaf of bread, and that's the third seal, where it says a denarii only buys, I don't have the quote in front of me, but basically a denarii or two can buy a bushel of wheat that day.
A whole day's wages for just a loaf of bread. In other words, you can barely survive just with what you're making from work.
Right.
So it seems that's where we're heading. Yes. So that's clearly becoming, I believe it was just in the final day of fall 2020 that they voted on that. I can't recall exactly now. Yeah. But, we're not claiming that what happens in America, America's only 4% of the world population, we know. But economically, what transpires in America is a harbinger for the whole world. We've known that for 100 years now.
Right.
And it's only become more true as time has marched on.
St. John,
we're running. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Well, you started quoting Saint somebody, so that sounds good to me.
Okay, yeah. Whenever you start with Saint, that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
St. John in the fourth seal, I'll just summarize it. He basically says that there will be the sword, famine, and plague. That's kind of the trifold chastisement in the sense of the Old Testament. But if you look at it in the context of peace being shattered, of an economic collapse, then you see basically it's a social collapse. The sword can be thought of as gangs, roving gangs, people looking for food, a whole breakdown in civility. When you consider right now the lockdowns, as we discussed earlier, 130 more million people facing starvation. I've got business guys out here in Canada telling me, Daniel, that they can't even get parts now from countries because the supply chain is so badly wounded, and that's affecting the food chain. And we're not hearing about it in North America, but I heard somebody just got back from Peru, and she was a wealthy young woman, and she said we had to rent a condo and start feeding families because of the lockdowns. Nobody was eating. You don't hear this on CNN and Fox News. I'm telling you, it's already happening, the fourth seal. And then, of course, plague. And we are seeing now a mutation of this virus in Gibraltar, the UK, and other countries right now. South Africa, a more deadly virus is now already beginning to break out. So once again, we already see the second, the third, the fourth seal. It's almost kind of like people say, well, where are we on this timeline? And we're kind of saying that they're kind of all happening at once.
Yeah, we've got it. And we emphasized this during our initial webcast even. We said, don't over-linearize this.
Yes.
There's going to be, this is not necessarily boom, 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 one to the next to the other. These are all going to crash upon us. And what we're seeing now, I think, is the beginning of every single one of them. The implicit beginning of every single one of them. Not that they've become as severe yet as they will be, but the one we haven't talked about yet in this webcast, and we're running low on time, so I'll really quickly say this, is persecution. We're going to see some of that coming from, the homosexual union endorsing comment from Pope Francis, but we're going to see it bursting forth much more severely, I hate to say, from the results of the United States election of this fall, where it seems that Harris-Biden were the victors. And I'm not commenting on the election fraud issues now. For all, it's still possible that there could be a change here. So I'm just saying this, assuming that Harris-Biden are the victors, if indeed they are. And I say Harris-Biden intentionally because I don't think that the plan is ultimately to have Biden be president. I think the plan is to have Biden resign and to have Kamala Harris be president. And I'm very worried about that because we have long known that she is an anti-Catholic bigot, that she is fundamentally opposed to the fundamentals of the Catholic faith. And, just look it up. I have had some things here I was going to share, but I don't think we have time. You'll easily discover on your own that there is much to be concerned about a Kamala Harris presidency regarding the persecution of the Catholic faith.
We know in the Middle East right now, for them, the persecution is real. Bishops there have said it's been emptied out the Middle East of Christians. In Africa, Boko Haram, the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. I helped bring a priest up from Nigeria. It's a wonderful story. I don't have time for it now. But he came from Nigeria. We were able to save him as his village was being burned. And so this is already happening. The lockdowns, Daniel, of the churches, of the suppression of the Eucharist. There are places now where the masses are canceled. Someone wrote me this morning, said the masses are canceled. This is a persecution of the church because the liquor store and the abortuary are still open. This is outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's begun. And I tell you, our bishops, they're going to have to speak up, and we need to pray for. Why do you think Our Lady has been saying all these decades, pray for your priests, pray for your shepherds, and everybody's like, pray for them. I'm just going to criticize them because they're not doing their jobs, So you know what? Now you see why you needed to pray for your priests and your bishops, because by their silence, the Mass is being canceled, and with that can only have grave consequences for the world.
Yeah, the notion that the Mass is non-essential. I mean, to even say that is blasphemy. Yeah. And yet that has become the accepted norm today, not only in the world, but in the church. And you can't imagine a more sickening situation than that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're in now. But that's not the note we want to end on. We want to end Should we move on to our final admonition now, or
let me
a few more
just kind
things you want to say first? Yeah,
sure. Sorry, just going to wrap that up. So basically, we've looked at all these different seals, and again, Dan and I, we want to encourage you not to look at this necessarily so linear. So where are we? Well, we're kind of experiencing all of these seals at once, even the illumination of conscience. I would say, Daniel, people are in their interior, are experiencing this nudging. Like, priests are telling me, some priests are saying, big fish are coming back. People who haven't been to confession for 40, 50 years. People have written you and I and saying, we've watched your webcast. I'm now going back to church. I'm praying the rosary. I'm having a conversion. I've read the series on your website. I'm dramatic things happen. Countless letters we've received. This is our joy to share this with you.
God is at work. That's a good point. The illumination, yes, it's literally going to happen in the future soon. Yeah. But it's also happening subtly and implicitly already. I mean, I know it's not me. Yeah. I'm just some knucklehead who wears the same shirt every day. And I just quote a few seers every now and then. People are coming back to God, to the faith, from places that were so far away, and you and I are constantly getting people informing us of this through email. So yeah, it's amazing what God is doing.
It's fantastic.
Right now.
Because that's what this is all about.
What he's gonna do. Yes, yeah, this is about souls coming back to God. All of this stuff, all this eschatology. Yeah, Mark and I, yes, people, of course, we will take it very seriously.
Look at me, folks. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah,
it's all about Jesus. It's all about coming back to Him. This is all
true, but it's to bring you back to Him.
Yes.
And that's every single seer, every single private revelation we've quoted has said the same thing on this point. Yes, that these things are coming, but that you have nothing to fear, that you can be in absolute peace and trust if you are in God, if you are with God. Every single one. I mean, find me a single seer, authentic seer, or private revelation who said, you better start flipping out, because you're not ready. Like, you can't handle this. No, every single one is saying, fear not.
Yeah.
So we want to, in our last minutes here, just emphasize that is the reaction you must have. Because Mark and I are both being inundated with people, with emails, correspondence from people terrified.
Well, I'm just gonna say this, because I think it's important, Daniel. I think you and I and all the team, Christine Watkins and Peter Bannister and you and I, who are the 4 team members of Countdown to the Kingdom, we all agree. We all feel that the warning is a ways off, and some people think it's going to happen like right before Christmas. We still feel it's a way off. And I'll just tell you personally, what I sense the Lord saying is that the closer you get to the eye of the storm, the faster the winds go. The faster events are going to be one after another. And remember, one of the seers on our website said this as well, Jennifer, that the events are going to come like boxcars of a train, one after another, boom, boom, boom. It's going to create confusion and chaos. And then in the midst of that will come the warning. I don't think the warning is for a while yet, but as we just said, all of these seals right now are already kind of happening. So only God knows when enough is going to be enough, when He says you need to be warned. But Daniel's right. We want to end this webcast telling you not to be afraid, not to be overthinking this. You don't need to be. You can live in a place, Daniel, we can live in a place of not being afraid.
Yeah. And we've exhorted you in the past to not be afraid, but we only have a couple minutes here. But we want to give you a couple concrete steps to ensure that you need not be afraid, instead of just tell you not to be afraid. So if we can run through this real quick, if you just follow us the next couple minutes here, if you follow the steps we're exhorting you to take here, you will, in fact, as a matter of fact, have nothing to fear.
Yes.
First step: accept the divine mercy. Look at a divine mercy image right now. If you can't find one, here's one for you right now. Look at that image. Look at that image. Pause the screen if you have to, and venerate this image and say with all of your heart, Jesus, I trust in you. Say that as many times as you have to until you absolutely mean it. In other words, accept the divine mercy. Then make an act of perfect contrition. So what's an act of perfect contrition? You make an act of the will to leave aside all of your sins. Again, I'm telling you right now, pause this video if you have to. Go, whatever mortal sins especially you're committing, do right now whatever you have to do to be done with them. If you have pornography, flush it, burn it, delete it. If you have it on your computer, don't put it in the recycle bin. Do shift delete so that it's permanently gone. If you're abusing drugs, flush it down the toilet. If you're in an immoral relationship, maybe fornicating, pause this video, text the person right now, and say, I'm not doing that anymore.
Can't do it
We're
again.
done. We're not doing that anymore. That is a mortal sin, and never again will I do that. Do that right now, and then make an act of perfect contrition. Say the following words. Oh my God, I am heartily sorry for having offended thee, and I detest all of my sins, not so much because of thy just punishments, but because I have offended thee, my God, who art all good and worthy of all my love. I firmly resolve, with the help of thy grace, to confess my sins, to do penance, and to amend my life. Amen. It's an act of perfect contrition. If you said that, and if you meant it like that, God has cleansed your soul, and you are ready for what's coming. As you said in that very act of contrition, yes, you still have to get to confession when you can. To do that, please. But God is bound by the sacraments, but he is not limited to the sacraments. He can forgive you on the spot, and he will, if you really mean it. If you really don't want to commit your sins anymore, if you really made that act of perfect contrition from your heart. And if you did, you are now cleansed. Make an act of consecration to the Holy Family. I don't have time to go through it right now. You can look one up there. It's very easy to do. Say it and mean it. Strive to live in the divine will. Say with all of your heart, Jesus, I trust in you. Thy will be done. I give you my will. Please give me yours in return. If you really mean that, he's given you his will. And you couldn't possibly be more ready for anything that is going to come than you are now.
St. John says, perfect love casts out all fear, because fear has to do with punishment. So when Daniel says, repent of these things, there's a freedom, there's a joy, and there's a fearlessness that comes because you know you're loved. You are loved. Get ready. Be prepared, because these times are now heading toward the eye of the storm. I'm Mark Mallett, along with Daniel O'Connor, and we'll see you again next time. God bless you.
God bless.